Last time we covered Browning's development of a blowback military handgun. But what if he could get paid twice to solve two different problems with the same design? Hi, I'm Othais, and this is not quite the same pistol as before. This is the Colt Model 1903, or Model M. Let's go ahead and get a look in the light box. With an overall length of 6 3/4 inches, this is a much handier pistol, although still not as small as most people assume. It weighs in at 1.5 pounds and has an 8-round detachable box magazine pushing the 32 ACP cartridge. Now, I'm sure most of you are subscribers who watch the show every other week, and therefore have already seen the previous episode on, well, the FN Model 1903 / Swedish Model 1907, a familiar but much larger handgun. If you haven't seen that episode, I highly recommend it before going into this, because we are definitely building on that a lot. Now, for those of you who are too lazy or just have terrible memories, let's do a small recap. Our homeschooled homeboy John Moses Browning had sold a pocket pistol to the Belgian firm C&Rsenal. This became the FN 1900, a 32 ACP wonder weapon in that for most of the world this would be their first taste of an auto-loading handgun, and despite its diminutive size and modest power, it was hecka sweet. FN soon wanted a more powerful handgun to market to large, guaranteed military contracts though, and Browning again would deliver. He took up most of the dressings from his current project with Colt, a locked breech semi-automatic, but left out the locked breech. He then added in a neat hold open and grip safety, and behold, the FN 1903, which would be adopted by Sweden as the M07. Now, last episode I went into a lot of detail about that Browning blowback design, but I left out almost exactly one half of the story in preparation for this episode. Can't have everything at once, guys. Now, when I say that this is related to the FN 1903, I don't mean cousins and I don't mean siblings. I mean twins separated at birth by caliber. I mean, maybe fraternal twins, but still, they look a lot alike, guys. Colt and FN could share one design because, like we said last time, they had split up the world. Colt would get US, Britain, and Ireland, and FN would hold down the European market, which also kind of gave them the rest of the world too, but I guess they weren't spending a lot of money on, stuff. Browning was about to put that little arrangement to a test because, like we said, FN came to him and said, hey man, can we get a big boy, full-powered, full grip, large military handgun out of you? And he said, sure, let me just sketch you something out. Well, that of course resulted in this. Colt, on the other hand, had been developing exactly that technology, although with a locked breech, and it was going somewhere, as we'll find out later, but not fast enough. They were burning time and money, and they were not making any back, not realistically. I mean, there's small commercial sales, the guns exist, but not enough of them, not enough to sustain. And meanwhile, Colt's looking over at FN and they're going, that little 1900 pistol you sold them on the cheap, that thing is selling like crazy hotcakes and has created, by the way, an entire industry around it. We should get in on this pocket pistol thing. It seems like a really good idea. And so they would poke Browning about the same time that FN poked Browning, and he would go ahead and work up another prototype using the exact same technology and the exact same layout, just scaled down. So both of them dropped at the same time around 1901. We saw the big guy last time, chambering 9mm Browning. Nothing much to add here now. What I left out was its littler near twin brother. A handy, compact, and sleek pocket pistol using the exact same configuration, just shrunk down. Being designed for the commercial market, it had no military-inspired automatic slide hold open, opting instead to just rely on that takedown position for the manual safety to hold the slide back. The sights were actually milled down into the slide instead of protruding like the final design. We'll see this idea come back in a later episode. Just like the big boy prototype, the little guy also sports an automatic grip safety, along with a compact manual safety that also keeps the slide lock shut. The barrel bushing from this would find a home on both the Colt and FN designs at first. Of course, this isn't a proper pocket pistol without 32 ACP. We've talked this cartridge up and down, folks, but it's always fun to see it back again. More ubiquitous in its day than 9mm is in ours. It's interesting to note that, actually this is a little bit later. Let me put that down for a moment. It's interesting to note that this, the first model, and we'll talk more in a moment, the first models of the final product were actually larger than the prototype. Colt had requested a pocket pistol, but when they got it in their hands, they realized they wanted a little bit more control for that beefy American hand, and this is what they came up with. Other changes included getting rid of that very sleek and interesting looking safety and putting on a more conventional style lever, and then the milled in beautifully recessed sights were replaced with a standard half moon front and a notched adjustable rear. I'm sure this just saved on manufacturer and used existing resources and machines. Everything to save a penny, especially when pennies were worth something. Now, Browning would come to an agreement with Colt to produce these pistols for a 40-cent royalty, and that was enough for him to sort of kind of be comfortable selling one design to two places. There probably was an upper limit on that 40 cents, although I have not found how many units they had to get through before they stopped paying that royalty. So now Colt had their new pocket pistol, internally known as the Model M, but marketed as the Colt Pocket Hammerless, which is a total lie because that's just an internal hammer pistol. Honestly, it was done more to distinguish it from a locked breech derivative of the military trials models, the Model 1903 Pocket Hammer. It wasn't until this faded into obscurity that our gun today became more recognized as the Model 1903. Now, despite being introduced to the prototype in 1901 and the name being 1903, you don't see full rollout of this gun until a couple years later. It actually parallels pretty well with that later release of the FN 1903, although for different production tool-up reasons. Now, we've got the gun done, and we're very lucky to have a first version of it here because there would be some updates. Thank you, Paul. So let's take a quick look at what Colt had going on. Zooming in, we're going to see a pretty similar design to what we saw last episode. I mean, take a look. It's in a book, Reading Rainbow. No, these guys are almost the same profile, almost the same assemblages. You'll notice this little guy happens to be missing. Let me get her to the side. So, blowback, slide operated, grip safety, and then no hold open. So mag's in, gun's empty, and no hold open. So we flip around. We have our safety, and then we have a hold open position here. So I can set her back, lock, and she's held open. Now, this would have served a takedown roll on the FN side of things, but here, we can't actually twist the barrel yet. We'll get there in a moment. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop our magazine, which is a heel release and has a beautifully knurled button. I mean, this is actually some of the best knurling I've felt. It really sticks to the thumb. Holes in the mag instead of that strip on the FN pattern. 32 ACP, single stack. Let me get that out of the way. Alright, so in order to disassemble this gun, we actually have to rely on some markings. Let me get my patented plastic pokey. Right at the front, we have, trying to get where I can show you guys, a little arrow mark. I'll go ahead and pop you a photo. Alright, cool. That arrow points at a vertical line, which must be aligned with the vertical portion of the frame, the end of the frame. So once you're there, you're able to twist the barrel out. Now, not a big deal on the later models. I'm going to skip ahead in time and give away a little bit of the show. Here's a later model. If we pull that back, we're going to see that we have no barrel bushing. It's actually built into the barrel itself, so that if we pull this guy back, we can just start twisting. That's how most of these are going to be. This early one, though, actually has the same bushing as the FN version. So that means push and turn 90 degrees, and it's easier to do off camera. Sorry, guys. So all I did was push that captive button, flipper 180, not 90, and then pull that guy out. Now I can push her back to the line, and I have to be able to see it, so I'm going to be a little bit hard for you guys to see. I just sort of hold it with my finger because there's not a lot of spring pressure here, and rotate this barrel, which is so much easier to do when I can actually look at what I'm doing instead of being in front of a camera. And by the way, takedown levers Colt are way better for this sort of thing than just putting an arbitrary mark and making us sort of fish for it. There it goes, right there. So I've got it to rotate a little over 90, and then I'm going to let that slide forward carefully, just like with the other gun. And I'm going to let her pop off. So, do not lose all of that. We've got our spring, we've got our plunger, and if I rotate this barrel back the other way, I can pull it out. And there are the very simple components of this handgun, and not at all alien compared to last episode. So I'm really not giving you anything you haven't learned before, except for the fact that the other model's a lot simpler. You just push and twist. Again, I would argue I much prefer that takedown lever position. But anyway, this is normally the part in the show where I would hand this over for an animation and then go over to Mae so that we can explain more details about the gun. But like I've already sort of given away, we're not quite there yet. There's some production variants on our way before we get to World War I, and I just want to briefly cover them before we get into under the hood stuff. Nothing major, not all of the variants. There's tons of minor changes, but just some broad general categories. And again, if you want to know more, there's books linked below in the description. Books are better than us when you want to identify a single individual pistol. Up to around serial number 70,000, we have a 4-inch barrel, which has a separate bushing at the end, like I just showed you. The slide serrations are plunge cut, tapering at the edges. Before the end of this block, they would become more common milled peaks. From about 70,000 to 105,000, we have the Type 2. A big difference here is the barrel and slide were reduced in length, by about a 1/4 inch. This was also the series in which the 380 version was introduced. Known as the Model 1908 or the Model N, I'm showing off a later version here, but basically they share the same outer dimensions as the 32s. A beefier extractor would be added to the whole series to accommodate and share more parts, but the 380s weren't 100% swappable with the 32s and required some specific tweaks. This will be an important lesson in the development of our next episode's pistol. I'm not going to get deep into the 380s, guys. They have their own serial range, etc. We'll do that another time because they really aren't the guns we're discussing today for World War I. The Type 3 runs from about 105,000 to about 470,000. The big change here is the elimination of the barrel bushing, and this is our model today. Somewhere in this series, the takedown position is moved up, meaning you don't have to retract quite as far to disassemble. Other various tweaks took place in this long run, but we're getting out of scope. There will, of course, be more variants than that, as this pistol would serve quite a long time. But we're not concerned with them so much today because we're stopping at World War I with this particular variant, as we've described, the Type 3. Now, we'll talk more about why this particular gun in a moment, but first, let's finally get under the hood and look at an animation. We'll load up the magazine and rack the slide to get started. Right away, you can see the moniker, Pocket Hammerless, is a bit of a stretch. This is a hammer. Internal, yes, but a hammer all the same. If you saw the last episode, there isn't much extra to detail here today. It's a simple blowback action, neat linear trigger, yada yada. I will go a bit further to show off this set of flat springs. They control the safety, sear, trigger, and magazine catch, all in one narrow channel at the rear of the grip, making it a very compact overall design while providing plenty of leverage. Unlike the previous FN, there are 3 tines for the trigger and sear, creating more even pressure on the system, improving the trigger pull. Again, the grip safety here just blocks the sear from rotating. As does the manual safety. Otherwise, this should be very familiar, so we'll let it play out on its own. And then give it to Mae.
mystery and you'll plainly see how we came to be the home of the brave and the free. It's no mystery how the thing was done. When you recall the three had been like Grant and Washington, the good old Yankee spirit in the air. And now old Bill had better take care. The Yanks are at it again, the Yanks are at it again. You'll find them everywhere, on land, sea, and in the air. Just take a look at our men, they're going in and there. Old Bill will surely get his fill. Look out, look out, the Yanks are at it again. The Yanks are at it again, the Yanks are at it again. You'll find them everywhere.
Now, it's fair to say that this appears to be a good little shooter, and certainly better than most guns available in 32 ACP in a compact size at that time. But at the moment, we're still discussing a civilian pistol. We haven't gotten into any sort of military introduction, and so I bet a lot of you are wondering just how this made it to the Great War, and the assumption would be, well, obviously in American pockets, but that might be a little hard to push because there's only one real military consideration of this pistol before World War I, and that is in 1911. You see, two weird prototypes would be turned over to the US government. They were likely a bid to interest them in a cavalry-centered, slide-operated handgun, and since they appeared in 1911, they may have been a proof of concept rather than a wholesale design. In both of these models, they sport odd levers on the right side of the slide designed to allow for single-handed cocking of the action. Honestly, they just make me think of the Spanish Jolo R. It appears they produced no real interest or further correspondence. And that's about as close as this little guy ever got to being a military pistol. It was really just a civilian 32 ACP, a latecomer to the market, not a gun that you're expected to see in military hands, and there would be no real reason for the US to requisition these or purchase them. You don't see foreign countries clamoring to get a hold of these outside of maybe police forces. That's where the whole thing would have been left off if not for the fact that, as we know, war were declared. Alright, so it's World War I, the big war of attrition. Everybody needs as many firearms as they can get, and these are ready to roll off. That means that doughboys snagged them up by the half dozen, stuck them in their various pockets, and marched off to the trenches, right? Not so much, guys. I'm sorry to say that the US barely gave these a second thought during the course of the war. Instead, the government would only purchase a measly 200. These were bound to the DC Navy Yard, where they were likely used by couriers and intelligence personnel for personal defense. Now, thousands were actually sent over to Britain, with the London Armory acting as a sales agent for Colt, although I can't say for sure that there's very specific issuance contracts. We do see some, RAF marked ones later on, although these tend to be post even World War II that they've turned up, and it's hard to know where the markings came from. These would have been small, hand-chosen lots, not big, broad government contracts that worked their way into different parts of the conflict, all right? So, kind of sounding like the FN 1903 at this point, where, yeah, it was produced, and yeah, people got their hands on it, but it really wasn't going to be a standard issue pistol for anybody. That is, of course, until, well, FN fell. We've talked about in our previous episode. They're no longer producing pistols, and the Belgian government, both what's left there and in exile, they need military handguns, and they are married to a 32 ACP Browning design, the FN 1900. Well, where else can they get a 32 ACP Browning design that's readily available, not already spoken for by some other nation, shipped right away? As a matter of fact, our gun today is from the Belgian contracts, which totaled some 24,002 units shipped with 33 cases of spare magazines. They ranged from serial number 1658542 to 241966 and sport an A in a diamond as an acceptance mark. These were delivered from 1915 through 1917 and certainly served as well or better than the FN 1900 pistols they replaced. Now, how the Belgians actually felt about these pistols, I can't say 100%. I did some digging. I usually can find a mention here or there in some old newspaper clippings or things like that, but there just is no account that clearly comes through that it was the Colt that was in their hand because, again, proprietary eponym, people like to say Browning about all sorts of different models of pistol, and you can never really be sure. So, probably pretty good, though, because after the war, the Belgians would select a slide-operated Browning 32 ACP as their standard pistol, replacing the FN 1900 that left production because of the war. But they didn't pick the Colts. They actually went with something a little more advanced and something that we'll see a little later in the series. Instead, these guys were a one-time purchase, well, one-time set of purchases, and stayed in service for a number of years before finally surplusing out. And we're lucky to have this one in our hands today. Again, thank you, Paul. Now, that is sort of a flat line to this whole build-up of a story. I'm sorry, guys. Despite being a very famous pistol in the US, it's not actually as world recognized as some of the FN designs. But I should probably do you a little favor of finishing out those major variations and giving you a hint of what's to come with this gun, although not directly related to World War I. We are now post-World War I on the fourth type, which runs from about serial 470,000 to nearly 555,000. Nearly identical, it just includes a magazine disconnect safety, one that prevents the action from firing if the magazine has been dropped out of the action. The fifth is again nearly identical to the fourth, running from 555,000 to 570,000. These are wartime guns for the US government, and most were Parkerized and many stamped US property. They were sold lend-lease to the British or used by US servicemen, particularly higher officers. But again, that's a story for another day, because that leaves us room to explore, in a later episode, the World War II impact of this gun and the 380 version. They're kind of tied together. Instead, we're going to limit ourselves just to World War I. Keep the scope, do it well, right guys? Alright, in that regard, we are now wrapped up, and we can turn this guy over to Mae for her opinion. Everyone join me in welcoming back our somethingist friend. Now, today we have the Colt Model 1903, and we need to get Mae's opinion on actually having shot the little darling. So, I'm just going to flip this around and hand it over here.
Thank you.
And I'll ask you our usual first question. First palm sensation, happy, sad, how you feeling ergonomically?
Happy, sad. Okay. Haven't heard that term. Anyway, so yeah, man, this is a totally weird new looking gun. It doesn't look like anything else I've shot so far. Wait a minute. You know, this is actually, this irks me a little bit because the other day I left Susie's sweater in the dryer. I let it go all the way through and it shrunk. I got in trouble. Colt does the exact same thing and everybody freaking loves them. Everybody's like, oh, Colt did a good job. Look, they made a smaller one. It's just not fair. It's just not fair. Anyway, yeah, there are a lot of similarities between these guns, except one of them smaller, and also the Colt, it actually, grip-wise, compared to the slide, it looks more proportionate compared to the, yeah, look, it looks like it fits the gun better, which is great. It's still got that sleek, slim profile to it, which is nice. There's still got some weight to it, but don't get me wrong, this one just feels more level. It feels right for a 32, and it's a decent size. I like this size for a 32. I mean, it's insane. It's got these nice curves to it. I feel like both of these guys, Othais could easily conceal carry both of them. I feel like that's a fantastic thought. He would totally conceal carry this one. Anyway, ergonomics, like I said, grip just feels right. It feels like I've got a full finger grip on there, which is nice. I still have a heel release to deal with, but at least it's a good one. I mean, it's like someone made me a pie. I in general don't like pies, but if I have to eat a pie, it's like I've had a pecan pie. Pecans, you know, if I had to eat a pie, that was the pie I was going to eat. Heel release is like that. I don't like pies, but if I'm going to eat a pie, it may as well be a pecan pie. It's a decent heel release. The safety, This one's a little harder to manipulate, just because I have to adjust my grip a little bit. However, the grip safety on this guy, it's a lot softer. Like I don't have to feel like I'm white knuckling it a lot, which is really kind of nice. But yeah, ergonomics wise, slide, it's a little bit stiffer maybe, but that might just be the size throwing me off on it. It might be just about the same in terms of weight as this guy, but you know, it's still not bad. It's still very easy for me to manipulate. So overall ergonomics, it's got better lines to it. It feels good for a 32. I really kind of like this for a 32. It feels good.
Honestly, it does feel, I'm going to reach across to you.
Hey.
It does feel like that's a May-sized FN 1903. This one's for me, and this is Papa Bear.
It's adorable. It's too long in the dryer.
This one is Bear Man-sized.
Forest woman.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so I will say I do agree with you. It's actually odd when I grab. May I borrow that? Actually, this is going to be awkward.
Fine. Forest woman goes gunless.
I'm holding both, and actually, let me get a proper grip. I'm holding both, and realistically, I feel like I have the same grip on both because as small as this little Colt is, they gave it the proportional grip, and that means that most of my pinky is on the grip. Most of my pinky is on this full military gun's grip too. It just reinforces what we said last episode, that I wish this had just one more round in the magazine. But that's enough about the FN 1903. Let me put that away. Aww. Let's get back to our topic today, the Colt 1903, which by the way is an American favorite for a lot of reasons. May was talking about the slimness for concealed carry. Let me tell you, this remained a concealed carry popular item, especially because they offered 380 later on.
I mean, you just think about some concealed carriers today, like they've got like ridges and bumps on the side or whatever. In some of these older guns, like I can't see myself concealed carrying a Luger. But this guy, yeah, he's right spot on.
No, this is actually one of the best original it is considered the pocket hammerless. Like the idea was that this was a concealed carry pistol made for concealed carry market. And I think it does it very well. I mean, it doesn't follow what we consider the modern trends to be, but at the time, this is advanced stuff. Now, anyway, back to the military aspect of this. You fired the gun. How was it actually shooting the thing?
Thank you. Overall, it was pretty pleasant. Starting out with the sights, you know, for the 32, these sights are actually pretty dang tall. They're one of the tallest sights out of the 32s that I have shot for the series, which is great. So, yeah. Kudos. The trigger is okay. I have to mention the FN 1903 again. I know you just put it away, but we talked about that trigger last time on that one being terrible. Whereas the Colt, the Colt 1903's trigger, it's better. It is definitely improved. Like it's still heavy. I still hear a little bit of a creak in there when I go to pull all the way through, but it is much improved. It is smoother. So I do appreciate that. The recoil. It fits. The gun's heavy, so I feel like that definitely helps mitigate some of that recoil. And I've got a full finger grip. Like, everything about this was comfortable as a shooter. It was great. And 32, less powerful cartridge, boom. I was drilling a hole. It was great. I was a fantastic shooter. Together, we were fantastic. And it was a fun shooter.
I have to agree. The Colt 1903 is a wonderful little shooter. Again, it's almost so good that you want to compare it to modern pistols, and that is where we get into the danger. It's best just to think of it as being a very superior model for the time. So, I think I might know where you're going with this, but would you, if you were issued something like this in World War I, would you be comfortable sort of staking your life on a gun like this?
You know, honestly, this was a pleasure to shoot. I shot well with it. It didn't have any problems on range. It performed well. It was all around, it was an A. It was a solid A on range. Now, only complaint that I really have that always makes me hesitate, and I've said it before, is that 32 ACP. It's just not a strong cartridge. However, that being said, shot a lot of 32s. I've said yes to several of them even. There's no way I could turn this one down. It was a good shooter, and I shot well with it, which really counts. And it's giving me that extra round. I've got 8 rounds in here. Solid for defense. The extra round's gonna make a difference. It does. So yeah, actually, interestingly enough, this might be my favorite 32. This might be the top of the 32s for this series for me.
What about the Savage pistol?
Honestly, this is number 2 for the 32s in this series for me. But yeah, it's a fantastic shooter. I definitely would take it into battle.
Okay. The Savage, I'm sorry, is pretty king of the 32s.
It's so cool.
Anyway.
Thanks, Paul.
Paul is our 32 king. We need to design a 32 crown. If somebody has ideas, please submit them below.
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you just mark her over a Burger King crown, because that's way easier.
That's
for
literally
me.
what I thought it was, the Burger King crown.
That idea is taken, ladies and gentlemen. All right, anyway, we have a yes on the Colt 1903. I agree, it is a good 32 ACP for the wartime. It's a gun that was expanded to be a 380 in another model that we'll talk about another time. It's stood the test of time. It's a beautiful gun. There's not much else to say, though. It's almost kind of sad when we have a really good little pistol because there's not as much to talk about. What are we really going to go up and down about on this gun? It just works. It's a reason why Colt had such a long-lasting name in America. We're not going to talk about modern Colt. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up and get to the credits. Thank you all for joining, and we hope you enjoy the music at the end.
Bye-bye. Really?
To interject that you're a liar, you like chicken pot pie.
We have to redo that whole thing.
No.
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 Frickin' hell. I'm really mad. I'm so mad. How did I not think of chicken pot pie?
Okay,
God damn it. That's the only kind of bright pie. Meat pies. Oh my god, I forgot about meat pies.
You just tried meat pies for the first time like a week ago.
But I've been thinking about them for like a year now. I forgot about meat pies. What is wrong with... I'm sorry, Codfather. You just fed me your delicious meat pies and I already forgot they existed.
Everybody asks me, like, they can't figure out how it takes like 30 hours to make a half-hour show. They think it's, the ones that believe me think it's due to editing and film and getting out of the range. No, it's all just Mae's this and you stimulating it.
I did nothing.
Man, we haven't been there in a while. We should go back and get some pies.
Okay, but I have to turn not red from laughter for a second. So.
Okay.
Okay, we're good?
Do you remember who you are?
Yes. What? Honestly, it does feel... I'm going to reach across to you.